So you explained that there are implications not just on free flow of information, but also a level playing field. But how does that impact the average ordinary person? How, I mean, do we care? Does everybody here care about the Printing Presses and Publications Act in the first place, and that it might be applied online? Is there anyone here?
Yes.
Yeah? Because we've let the PPPA slide for so long, you know, there's been not much outrage about how it has controlled the press, as Dr. Azmi pointed out very drastically, resulting in really crappy reports.
I think it's because we're used to we're used to our newspapers being like that, and over the past 10 years, because of the freedom of the cyber world, you know, you just turn somewhere else, you know, to get your news. I mean, most of the young people I come in contact with do not read newspapers anymore. They get the information from the net. I think this is also another thing which is worrying the government, because they don't like young people. They're scared of young people, and knowing that they can't control the minds of young people through their usual medium, and that there are alternatives, I think has also led them to want to control the content of the net. As it is, they do control it. I mean, it's pornographic sites and things like that, but that means they can do it, and so they can move on to other things, right? People don't care about the Printing Presses and Publications Act anymore because people don't care about our newspapers anymore. And I think that's the reason why. You know, we've gotten so used to them being of such poor independence that it's become part of the landscape, and we just turn somewhere else to get our news, and which is a shame, you know. But now we have to publicize this as much as possible, because our alternative is now going to be threatened as well.
A part of the problem, though, with that is the resources that are available to the online media are far, far fewer than the resources that are available to the print media. The revenue models for the online media are very, very different than those for the print media. And it means that the quality of journalism that they can actually afford to pay for is bound to be lower. They can't afford to spend money on... I'm not saying that, unfortunately, our print media, and this isn't just true of Malaysia, this is true internationally, are not investing as much as they could in high-quality journalism. And I think that they should be and could be investing in their journalists a lot more. I think that there are some very good journalists in the print media, but a lot of the very good journalists leave for precisely this reason, because they're not being invested in. But the online media don't have those resources available. And for things like investigative journalism, take environmental journalism as a major example, where there are lots of stories in Malaysia that are just not being told, because it requires money, it requires time to actually go out and get those stories a lot of the time. So I think that that's one of the ways in which we, as the Malaysian public, lose from the lack of independence of our media, the very commercial models that are used to drive the media in Malaysia, and also because of the increasing reliance on basically an under-resourced news gathering outfits.
Coming back to internet media, I think the impact of having an expanded jurisdictions of PPPA and others is perhaps not so much about productions of news. It comes to an extent that how far you can actually control. If you want to block news from coming into the internet, you have to turn Malaysia into a North Korea, some sort of a China, which is quite impossible. What they can do is to limit and restrict the existence of local internet media. So at the end of the day, there's a significant segment of the population would think that, well, all those news may be true, but they are produced by foreigners, so they will contain some foreign bias. And for that reason, they would easily dismiss it. but there will be enough people who would still look out for foreign news. So news would still come in. So what's the real impact? Would be more of inhibiting expression. Because now what you find is that you're not happy with the government. You go to Facebook, you go to Twitter, you go to YouTube, you find a lot of materials you can easily forward. So there's a very vibrant public sphere out there, which is completely not in the control of the government. Now, the expanded act is not aiming at activists. In my reading, it's actually aiming at ordinary people. And it probably would not really result in any imprisonment, any fine, because that would embarrass the government. All they need to do is to pick up one of you and call you in for investigation. That's enough to send a chilling effect to normal people. And the moment that when people start worrying about the outcome, the consequences of their expression online, you would find the volume of online conversation reduce tremendously. Now, the following outcome of that is that fewer people would even do any action. So the next election is very much in control. Because, and what happened, you may ask and say, what happened to those people who still look out for foreign news, but yet they do not speak up? Many of them were just thinking of migrating. As what Asmi said just now, because that our newspaper, our print is so crappy, that people migrate from print to online media. So what if that when the online media, which is very much depending on self-produced content, when that is controlled, many Malaysians who are actually critical would just think of like the only way out is go overseas, or wait until the Egyptian moment, the Tunisian moment to come, which is dramatic and pathetic.
The thing about this is that the government is giving us mixed signals. On the one hand, you have them saying they're not going to amend anything, and on the other hand, they said they are going to amend some things. So it's a bit of a mixed signal. You can't use the Printing Presses Publications Act on the internet without amending some things, because the nature of the law is really aimed at print media, at the printed word. So that it has to be amended. But then having said that, you can't just automatically use it. Rais Yatim said, there's things that can be used on the media, on the internet, like Section 3 of the Printing Presses and Publications Act. Section 3 of the Printing Presses and Publications Act is about owning a printing press. So I don't see how that can be used on the internet because there's no need for a printing press. But then this is Rais Yatim. His grasp of the law is not as strong as his grasp of Indonesian-Malaysian relations. So it's...
Why do you need to control the internet?
Why?
Because of people like you.
I didn't do anything.
Suggesting his contributions, bilateral.
You listen to how he speaks Bahasa Malaysia. It doesn't sound like a Malaysian speaking Bahasa Malaysia. It sounds like an Indonesian speaking Bahasa Malaysia. It's very strange. I think he's trying to establish a bond. That's what I mean. I don't know what you think I'm implying. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the chilling effect that Chin Hart was speaking about, this isn't just something that's airy-fairy and out there. When Jeff Wee and Aharuddin Atan were being investigated, there was a case taken against them by the NST, blogs closed down, and they said there was one blog where the owner said, "It's getting too hot here, I'm going." So it does happen. Now, I agree with Asmi that you can't take... the only way you can define the printing press, as I can see it, is that every computer in this country is the equivalent of a printing press, because that's where it's published. That's where you get the words coming out in a form that's readable. The information becomes readable through the use of a computer. So perhaps they're going to license every single computer. And that's the only way they can really take this law and apply it, is by having thousands upon thousands of licenses. And if you think about it, it means also licensing every mobile phone. Business travellers who come into Malaysia would need a license for their computers. It would mean changing the entire... what might be a good thing is changing the entire structure of giving out licenses for the PPPA and making it a far more automatic process. But I suspect that that isn't what they have in mind. The other thing, though, is that because of the chilling effect, it could have an impact. Because it would be very easy to automatically generate, say, 10,000 notices to blogs saying, this blog does not have a license. Given that the content is of this nature, you need to go and get a license, and have an impact upon all the people that receive a letter to that effect. So it could curtail discussion, it could curtail the public space, even though it would be very hard as it stands to implement it. Does that make sense? People are looking a bit confused.
Okay. I'd like to, when coming to analyze Malaysian politics, I always like to think that it's actually CSI. So you have to think like criminal to understand how crimes could be committed. Okay. There's good reason that why they send out the...
That's why you're a political scientist.
Yeah, and I should be a private investigator. That probably I get bought off. Okay. I think there's good reason why they actually send contradicting signals, confusing signals. Probably because of different degree of intelligence of those people deciding what to do. Now, to table a new amendment to the law would make it much more explicit, but there is a risk of that is that you need to go through parliamentary debate. No matter how you delay the release of the bill, it still comes to the point that people will start make a lot of hoo-ha. Reinterpreting the law is much easier, because what you do is to say from now on there is a guideline, and you may release it in a rather low profile way, not to attract too much attention, but when necessary, you can come and use it on internet users and so on. So this is how I figure that they would use the act. I don't think they're going to monitor. They're going to use printing presses. The entire section on printing presses. That's part 2, licensing of printing presses. I don't think that is going to be used because it's specifically for print. In fact, it has not been used effectively. By definition, printing press refers to any process of printing paper or printing at a rate of 1,000 impressions per hour or more, which is basically about 166 impressions per minute. If you have a good quality printer, you probably could have done that already. But no one actually go around and ask you to have a printing press. They basically, just basically let go. It's just like you have firm censorship act in Malaysia, and no one really bother and go and check every time you take a YouTube, see whether you have sent in to Finas for, what was that? Yeah, censorship. No one can, right? So you
think you're part 3 and part 4.
Yeah, so I think they would take it out. But what part 4 they still can control, because that is actually defined as propagation. Part 4 is undesirable propagation. As I say, technically this can constitute a propagation. So they can actually use it. They can expand it to anything. Just now when I read out the definition, I actually skipped 2 more. One is actually a document, newspaper, book, and periodical, which is quite straightforward. But there's another one, an audio recording. If you apply D, technically anything on the internet would be applicable, because they either show you visual, suggest ideas or words, or they are in audio form. So anything is actually applicable. So what I need to do is just to give you a creative interpretation. Imagine that I'm the criminal. This is what I'll do. I'll say that all publications, periodicals, including blogs, would have to be registered, would have to get a permit. But if you're not a publisher of a commercial nature, all you need to do is just register your name. So technically, every blog would have to register your name, and they're not going to enforce it throughout, but they will pick up whatever case they want, and they're going to ask you and say, how come you're not registering? The whole idea here was to actually send a chilling effect. Many people are actually writing anonymously to for whatever reason they have in mind, for whether it's a real or imagined fear. That's what they do. The moment you ask them to say, reveal your real identity, they wouldn't. They would even immediately shut down their Facebook account. Look at how many anonymous names you have on Facebook, right? So it's very easy for them to control. And when you come to false news, as I say, what they need to do is actually go after the RT and simply pick someone and say, now, tell me, have you verified the truth? And there will be enough people who are not careful enough to fall onto any of this trap. And all they need is just a living example. Someone will come out and say, okay, I need to use internet very responsibly and so on. That's enough to shut many people off. And the moment when you don't express yourself, fewer people would dare to do anything. Now, many people would talk about we wait for the next elections and we change. I believe it would not be. If the risk is much more, when you really think about if all they need was just to create some violent incident before election, then people would not go out at all. Because the question is the fear.
Let's also remember that the article that Chin Hua was talking about, section which Chin Hua was talking about, section 8, about false news. There's no definition of false news. It's not defined. So if I was to put on my blog that Rosman Mansour is extremely overweight, for example, they could challenge it as false news because there's no definition of false news. Or Najib is bald, but the thing here is that another point is I can guarantee you, if they go ahead with what they're planning to do, they will be very, very selective in who they use the law against. The UMNO goons and the cyber troopers can say anything that they want, can make up any lie that they want, and they will get away with it scot-free because the person who actually takes action is the DPP. The DPP, the Deputy Public Prosecutor, is the one who is empowered to take action under this law. And I can guarantee you they won't use it against their own people. They'll use it against anyone else except their own. And that's what's going to happen. So, so it's not going to just be an unfair law. It's going to be an unfair enforced law as well.